Hello and welcome to One on One. I'm Vernon Ramesar, and I'm very pleased to say my guest today is Rudolph Hanamji, who is a member of the COP National Executive and best dressed guest so far for the year. Welcome to the program, Rudolph.
Thank you for having me, Vernon.
Well, I had to have you, well, we spoke on the phone before when we arranged this, and of course, shortly thereafter, you were in the papers, you and a few others, as a result of visiting a Chinese restaurant in central Trinidad. Obviously, there is some division in terms of the direction that members would like the COP to go in. You're a part of a group that believes that perhaps the current arrangement needs to be looked at very carefully with a view to perhaps separating from, or at least having one member separate from the coalition. Where exactly are we right now with that?
Vernon, we are at, I would say, a middle passage in a series of activities and interactions that have been taking place over the last 2 years. We are at the position where members like myself, who believe that the Congress of the People has moved far away from its founding principles, have no other option but to raise these motions in a last attempt to get the leaders of the party to listen to the membership and get our party back on track. We are at a junction. We are at that moment. It would either be the COP's resurrection or its Waterloo, and that's where we're at.
Because I think many people, obviously the COP came out of a certain group of people that had certain beliefs, and very strongly held beliefs, that were not in sync with the then UNC. As a result of the partnership, though, many people seem to perceive the COP as gradually taking on the color of the UNC, sort of UNC light, if you will. And that could ultimately lead to its demise, couldn't it?
Well, that's exactly our point, is that when we started this, and I want to say categorically that the Congress of the People was the architect of the People's Partnership and coalition politics. We went out on the grand consensus. Mr. Dukran's vision was to build that coalition of interests, and the Movement for Social Justice was actually our first partner in this coalition. So we started at that strongest position, that most ideal position of new politics.
So you're making it clear then that it's not what many people think, which is that the UNC embraced these other parties, and therefore the UNC is the parent.
No, the Congress of the People, while we may have a nominal number of seats, we brought the hierarching architecture and the vision for the coalition and the integrity which we had at that time. However, as you're rightfully saying, over time, we have started to morph into old politics, where every day you read in the newspapers, people are describing the Congress of the People as the UNC B team. Mm-hmm. And after last night, some would even dare to say maybe it's C team. So that is why, again, members are very concerned that should the Congress of the People need to stand on its own, we would not have the identity anymore and the brand that would have carried us to 148,000 votes in 2007.
And the goodwill, I guess.
And the goodwill. We have basically frittered that away. We have sold it to the United National Congress, and I can understand that other members, when we first joined, may have thought new leader, new vision, but we are seeing today that the UNC has not changed its spots. And the Congress of the People actually has ended up changing its own.
So can it eventually just become, I mean, even when you were, what I like to call in the wilderness, that period when you got a huge number of votes for a new party, yet didn't get a seat,
seats.
You still kept, nobody ever said the COP was irrelevant, except maybe Mr. Pandey. But nobody said the COP was irrelevant, really. Now you hear it said quite often. Even on our panel last night, one of our panelists said, well, the COP is irrelevant.
Yes, because relevance is a matter, as a factor of juxtaposition against the other political parties. And if one is becoming more and more like the status quo, then your relevance to change things, to give people a different option, no longer exists. So even when we did not have a single seat in Parliament, the country can still look to the Congress of the People to provide some sort of moral high ground, some guidance, some authority. as exemplified when we ran the Axi-Tax program. We had an entire nation following us against the sitting government. Today, I beg to say that if we were to run any type of campaign, even if it were for the best cause, I wonder how many people would follow us today. And I lay that responsibility at the feet of the political leader and his deputy political leaders.
Well, let's talk about the executive. For the first little while there in the partnership, you had an interesting situation, which is probably as it should be, where you had the people who were ministers of the COP, who were within the cabinet, not being able to say things particularly strongly if they felt they were against the government move, but you had your executive, in the form of Joseph Tony and Mr. De Lima, for example, speaking out very strongly, condemning certain things like Mr. Warner, for example, at the time. So at least there was a COP voice that was differing from the conventional wisdom. Now it seems to have toned down to the point where it's almost like a little dim echo of objection.
I think that the Congress of the People has really been affected by the disaffection of a number of its stalwart members. So they have moved away from the party, whether, I'm not saying that they resign per se, but they're not as active as they used to be. And as a result, the party has become quieter, as you're rightfully saying. But tied to that, while the chairman and party members would have spoken out against certain things, it is by the very actions of the MPs and the political leader at times, which in the public's perception contradicted what the party was saying, that people started losing faith in the integrity of the party, because you can't have a party saying one thing and then the leader and the MPs of that party acting in a contrary manner. For example, the Congress of the People, its National Council, very recently agreed that we would not join the UNC on its joint platforms. This was pre-election bell. This was when they were doing their Monday night four, etc. And then lo and behold, our political leader in St. Augustine joins the UNC on a platform that they've planned for his constituency. Now, if I were the leader, and many others would agree with me, I would have called my troops and held my own meeting in my constituency, because you can't allow a partner to outfox you like that, so that members of your party turn around and say, how did you make that decision when we asked you not to? And that is exactly what is happening in the party today.
So you've gone then, I mean, let's be honest about it. I mean, even COP members, I no joke about it. You've gone from being the party that represented new politics and hope and, if you will, the sort of Barack Obama sort of approach to getting people riled up and excited about possibilities, to the Eat a Food Party. I mean, you know that's what the COP is being called.
It really hurts when I hear that, but one has to accept truth. And truth is part perception and part reality. And to a large extent, you see a number of members clamoring that the reason we should stay in the partnership is because we have to protect all these things that we got, whether it were ministerial positions, whether it is URP contracts, etc. When in fact, we are forgetting that the People's Partnership was not a partnership with political interests. It is, as the name suggests, a social contract with the citizens, the people of Trinidad and Tobago. It's the People's Partnership. So we have to remember and remind ourselves that our responsibility, first and foremost, lies not with protecting our partners, but with protecting the people that we are there to serve and that we want to represent.
And speaking up for that constituency as well. And yet, to the best of my knowledge, in the several years we've had the People's Partnership, there is no formalized structure where the individual leaders sit down and have a single voice each and put forward the different party positions.
No, and I mean,
it's whenever there are ad hoc meetings every now and then.
The party the political leader released a statement last night calling all of a sudden for a leaders meeting. One would think that this would have been happening all along. Now,
well, David Abdullah was calling for it for the longest time.
And many of us told our leader and our chairman, Joseph Tony, at the time, if a certain partner does not want to call the meeting, because at the time Jack Warner was the chairman of the chairman's meeting, and of course the Prime Minister, as the leader of the UNC, she was the chairman of the leaders' meeting. If they don't want to call the meeting, we say we created this partnership, this coalition. Well, let us call the meeting and let the other partners present themselves. And that is what leadership is about. That is the type of leadership, Vernon, that we are looking for in the country and in the Congress of the People. We want leaders who are not going to allow themselves to be subsumed by others. Because what is happening now is that people within the party want to know, is Prakash Ramadar really the leader of the Congress of the People, or is it Kamala Prasad Bisesa? And that goes to the core of any organization. The leader will say that we are attacking him internally, but I wish to reiterate that his political stock was not diminished by this motion. It was diminished over the last 3 years. And for him to say that the results last night and what happened in Tobago and what is being reported in newspapers, etc., is not a failure of coalition politics, he needs to finish that statement and say, maybe it's not a failure of the coalition, it's a failure of those who were entrusted to manage the coalition, the elected representatives. They have failed to bring about the type of change and delivery that they promised.
Well, from what you're saying, though, unless there's some change in the principal players, how are you going to expect any change to happen for the COP? I mean, you had your last elections, which, let's face it, obviously didn't galvanize everybody who voted for you before, because it was a fairly small turnout, wasn't
it?
I mean, a rather disappointing one.
Just
even,
under 5,000.
Yeah, which is very small for a major party. But given you're going to have the same players involved, how do you expect any change to happen within the COP?
Well,
and also, I know your background is in marketing, a long, illustrious career in marketing for somebody your age, but in terms of a brand, has a COP brand been so tarnished that it can't be rescued?
I always say, Vernon, that the COP is its membership. Each of us in our individual capacity carries that flag. So when I sit with you, when I sit with anyone else, and I speak of the COP, they look at the COP through my eyes based on the belief that they have in me as an individual, someone that they might trust and believe in. So each of the members now has to come back to the party and fly that flag again and basically let the leaders know that they no longer can carry that flag on their own, because they are not doing a very good job of keeping that brand. As a matter of fact, when Anil Roberts goes out on a tangent and he attacks the leader, attacks the party and sides with others, that can't be building our brand and keeping our flag high. That's going to cause people to say, what's wrong with that party? So it is time for the COP, which believes in bottom-up governance, for it to reach back out to its membership and put the fate of the party back in the hands of its members. Because I honestly believe only the members can take this party forward right now. We have a leadership vacuum. It is clear as day. It's being spoken about on the blogs, on the call-in programs. This is not the word of Rudolph Hanamji. This is the word on the ground. So the members need to come forward, and only through us can the brand be resurrected.
But a lot of those members are largely disaffected, have lost their enthusiasm. I mean, I remember a few years ago, all of a sudden my friends were turning COP by the droves, and very enthusiastic. Everywhere I'd go, whether it was a social event or whatever, they'd be talking about exciting plans and, new politics, etc., etc. Now I occasionally run into you, and you're always up and positive about things. But a lot of those people have just dropped away. They don't seem particularly interested anymore.
There was nothing anymore for them to be interested in, because all of the policies and programs that the COP excited the nation about, they were all of a sudden sidelined, and the government has started to focus on the old paradigms. You're hearing more and more about make-work programming, about construction projects, about road works. But where are things that we spoke about? We had grand ideas about creating community networks where local government bodies would be supported by community-enabled agencies. We had programs for young people to get involved in governance. The COP spoke about having proteges under each minister. Where are all of those ideas?
Constitutional reform was big as well, and it's dragging on quite a while now.
It's been dragging on for quite a while, and the leader, he has been given the mandate for that. And at the same time, you wonder, will the UNC really support proportional representation? But I also want to throw out to people that proportional representation by itself is not what we need to focus on, because that will only ensure that different groups have a position in the government. What we need to focus on is realizing a dream. It is about inspiring a nation to want more, because you don't need constitutional reform to get people to be better citizens, to be better countrymen. As a matter of fact, take a simple example. If you really believe in the right of recall, you don't need to even amend the Constitution. There are mechanisms that you can run polls within MPs' districts to find out if people want them there or not. You speak about fixed election dates. You can amend the Constitution in the morning to have a fixed election date, or you can simply tell the nation the date for election is X. But we hide behind legislative review, and we don't look at how we can build a nation by inspiring people.
You touched on last night's event earlier on a couple of times, and you mentioned that you might even be seen as the C team now. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because all of a sudden a lot of attention is being focused on Jack Warner as the other possibility. And it's pushing the COP back a little bit.
Isn't that an amazing paradigm shift?
It is very strange, I have to admit, but it seems to be something that's capturing the public's attention.
When I think about it, it is almost as though someone has taken the skin of the COP, the label, and they have used it as a blanket to cover themselves. And they've presented the nation with this alternative option, and using all of the rhetoric that used to be the guiding philosophy of Mr. Dukaran and others. And unfortunately, because again, the Congress of the People has not been a leader in politics, it has created this vacuum. And we, the founding members, we are fed up of this. We want to reinstate our party, we want to rebuild it, we want to work on that brand image, and we want to really deliver to the people a new vision. We may not be able to deliver houses and leases and food cards, which is what other parties utilize to manipulate the population. We want to take the long, hard road that will, in generations to come, result in a better country. And that is what the members who have coalesced with these motions, that's what we really want to do. Obama said that what we need in this fight is for people who will stand up and speak up and compel us to do what is necessary at this time. And that is this is really a clarion call to get all of those interest groups, members, supporters, sympathizers, people who believe in a better Trinidad and Tobago, to come forward and say, now is the time. And don't allow charlatans to use the blanket of rhetoric to basically create this hysteria that they're going to offer something different.
Well, I suppose the thing with Obama that you mentioned there is the fact that he at least tried to follow through on a lot of his promises, and if he failed, he admitted that he failed, but he was at least seen to be making the effort and made some progress in certain areas. I'm wondering, when you look at this partnership in terms of any of the sort of more aspirational aspects of it, if they've achieved them.
I only hear daily that, well, the PNM did it, or we inherited X from the PNM. If when Obama took up his stewardship, he kept blaming George Bush, he would not be where he is today. You do that up to a point to make the statement that, listen, what we have is tough. But then you get going. And I am only hearing laptops for children, children's life fund. I am not hearing anything else. I am not hearing...
Well, what you're hearing a lot of, Rudy, is you're hearing a lot of everybody sort of continuing with the Kamala Mania theme, which is to say, isn't our Prime Minister wonderful? And therefore that's sort of eclipsing the COP because the focus becomes Kamala Prasad-Besessar all the time.
And that is not, even that, Mr. Dukran always spoke about monolithic parties and gatekeepers. We, last night, when you listened to the UNC camp, as you're rightfully saying, it was almost as though this election was about the Prime Minister, and last night was about saving her face. I mean, many political proponents, political strategists who know much more than I do about politics, advised early on that she should have learned from Tobago and stayed out of that campaign. And likewise, the Congress of the People. While I understand you want to support a partner, we should not have bound ourselves so closely so as to once again create the perception that we are one and the same. We needed to differentiate ourselves as much as possible. And while we were talking out about the ILP and what was happening in that campaign, we should have also spoken out about the rhetoric and the tribal crapo politics that was being spewed on the United National Congress's platform as well.
Because it got very nasty, which is not something that the COP is famous. You guys don't really normally indulge in that.
No. And
with the exception perhaps of your member Anna Roberts.
Well, and almost by consent and by our own actions, we encouraged it. And that again is where people are saying, why has our leader not differentiated himself enough from the other leaders in the coalition?
Do you think that the time frame has almost expired now, because now the focus is on the ILP? So whereas the COP had a chance for a good while there to sort of pull itself away and say, listen, here's what we stand for, etc., etc. Now everybody's looking at Jack Warner, which of course would be the last choice for a COP member, given the fact you've always had a very strong stand that he shouldn't have been in government in the first place. Is it too late now?
The light at the end of the tunnel is diminishing. Many of us are seeing the tunnel actually getting longer, and that light is dimming. But I will say this much. Some of us, luckily, we have time on our side. And all the flashes in the pans today, maybe in time they will be shown for what they really are. And if now, I really believe this is the last opportunity to make that catapult, because while people are heavily criticizing us, Vernon, I think if we were to make the right decision now, people will say, okay, you all acknowledge that you all made mistakes, you all did things that were not in keeping, but you have now made a break, a start, and we may not have 148,000, we may not win a single seat in 2015, but if we can regain our credibility in 2020 or 2025, perhaps the Congress of the People will one day show and prove itself to be the party of choice.
Now the National Council meeting is on the 11th of August, I think you told me?
Most likely. It's normally the second Sunday in August.
And what happens if the measures are not followed, that you and your supporters are saying, you know, listen, we need to look at this very carefully, and what if the existing executive says, nah, we're happy. We want to make it work.
You can't expect a different outcome by having the same inputs. And if that is the decision of the delegates on that day, I for one pronounce that really will be the end of the COP's chances to differentiate itself.
And if that's the case, are you staying on board the Titanic as you see it?
I think that I would have to make a conscious decision that the vessel which held the universal principles and the ethics of good governance may no longer be the right vessel to help work with and to contain myself within. I think that I would have to separate myself from that, but I would always coalesce with the members who are like-minded with myself, and we would have to make that decision where we go from there.
And the incident with the meeting the other day, that must have colored your perception of the party a little bit, or the existing form of the party, the fact that you were told, no, this wasn't an executive meeting, but we were discussing serious issues.
Well, funnily enough, we did not have any intention of attending because we didn't know about the meeting until the morning of, when members in the meeting started calling us, and other members who heard about it through similar means started contacting us and saying, why were you all not invited? It was actually raised at the meeting. And they told us, as elected members, you have a responsibility to go there and represent us. Because from all accounts, it turned into a national council meeting, a virtual national council meeting, because when we stormed and we sat down very quietly, we noticed there was a head table, the meeting was being chaired, and all protocols were being observed. And the issues being discussed were not necessarily only the motions, they were political issues of national importance. And 3 national executive members who have all in our own right worked very hard for this party, and it is there in black and white, were not invited. And the political leader suggests to the media that the reason is a lack of resources. Vernon, we didn't go there to eat a food. We went there to discuss. We didn't even drink from a glass of water. So resources, really? Many times we have met at Operations Center and we've only had water to drink. So I refuse that. I refuse to accept that as a reason. It's as clear to anyone who has eyes to see that that was a deliberate attempt to keep us out of that meeting.
Well, we're completely out of time, Rudy. I guess we'll see what happens on or around the 11th.
Yes, I call all members who are excited and interested about rebuilding the party, please come forward. Come forward and have your voice heard. I mean, you don't even have to support the motion, but get our leadership back in a gear that can get us to another level.
Rudy, it's been a great pleasure having
My
you on the
pleasure,
program.
thank you
You so much for being here. You've been watching One on One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.